Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
There's no turning back now.
Let's put on the show.
You're listening to the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Beth?
And Brian.
So we've got a lot of news to catch up on, first of all, but we have kind of a split topic this week. We have one that was suggested by a listener, and then also a kind of mini trip report, because Brian went somewhere pretty cool this last week. So I'm excited to dive in and talk about some of this stuff. Let's talk about our news this week first, as always. We have a parade announcement for Disney's Very Merriest After Hours event. It's exciting that we're getting some kind of parade. I don't know that I'm still quite ready to dive into the parties yet, but I think of all of the things, like all of the parties, the Christmas one is the one that lacks the least post-COVID, which is kind of exciting. I mean,
Yeah. My thing is, what is it missing from the regular Very Merry? Other than, I guess, meet and greets.
That's pretty
I
much
think
it,
that's
is the meet
it.
and greets.
So why is it so expensive?
That's a very good question. Because it can be, I think, is the answer.
Oh, man. It starts at $169 a person. That is insane.
What's normal Christmas party pricing? It's close
I feel like
to
it's
that,
normally
isn't
like
it?
$99 starting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
felt like it topped out maybe at 170 for like Christmas Eve and stuff, but starting at that's insane.
I suppose. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of the yearly price hike thing. Unfortunately, it's just more noticeable because the parties, the parks, and everything are coming back to normal capacity. And it's like, oh yeah, things are coming back to normal. With the normalcy is also a price change.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess they're just doing 2 years worth of price increases once.
Yeah, really. I guess there's also not a stage show, which that honestly is more of a reason to go to the Christmas party.
Oh, we won't get to listen to Text Me Merry Christmas.
Oh no.
Whatever will we do?
But yeah, so if you want to pay $169 up to $249 per person for some cookies and hot chocolate and a parade, have fun.
Well, we also answered the question that I asked a couple weeks back when they said that there were going to be attraction overlays with an S. And it looks like we're getting obviously the Jingle Cruise, but Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor is getting new jokes. So
I
Well,
feel like
that's
they get
pretty
that.
cool.
Yeah, that's an easy one. I'll give it to you this time, Disney. In other news, Space 2020 is officially opening in September 2021 at Epcot. So, who's all excited for the new restaurant? Did you guys watch the video announcement thing that they did?
Yes, it looks very cool.
it does.
I think it looks a lot better than I expected to. Like, I expected it to be pulled off pretty well, but I don't know. I'm actually pretty excited for this one, and it's a novelty restaurant that I think I'm going to eventually try out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like how it has old school Epcot vibes. It's not like yet another IP thrown into the parks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's a good place for it to be.
I'm curious. They haven't released menus yet or anything, have they?
I don't think so, and I feel like that's probably not going to be announced until like opening.
Yeah.
I
I mean, obviously, I think the experience is more important than the food. I'm just curious about what the prices are going to be.
Well, my question along with that was like, I wonder what they're gonna serve, because I feel like Disney very specifically fits a lot of menus into, and well, a lot of restaurants into like the style of food for that restaurant. Like they try to theme the food with the restaurant. I don't know how you could really theme space food besides like that frozen
It's
astronaut ice cream stuff.
yeah, it's all the dehydrated food that astronauts eat in space. Delicious. And Dippin' Dots, because it's the ice cream of the future.
Hmm.
No, I am interested to see what will be on the menu here, and I hope that they, at least make some sort of attempt to make it, visually or thematically relevant.
Part of this, just in reading this article, I should probably read these before I put them in the show notes, but there's a chunk in here that says, and views are just part of the experience. Our Disney Imagineers are excited to have created this experience for executive chef Mark Kushi to showcase his culinary wonders. The Space 220 restaurant menu will feature stellar dishes and gourmet recipes with a 2-course prefix menu for lunch and a 3-course prefix menu for dinner. So dollar signs, dollar signs, dollar signs.
That's okay. I mean, when it's a cool, like, themed restaurant, I don't mind dishing out a little extra cash rather than, just another fancy restaurant. This one actually has my attention, so
Yeah.
I'll definitely give it a try.
I think even though it does seem like it's going to be pricey, it has my attention too. Like, that's not to say that I think it's going to be a bad value. I don't love the prefix menu options. And maybe that's just me being burned from Be Our Guest.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if this is going to fit into the same like dining plan space too, where it's like 2 credits to eat here. It's got to be.
I would say at least.
Yeah. Anywho, that's coming soon. We're excited, and I'm sure we'll have more of that in the news in the next coming month. So our next thing on here, this topic's gonna cause some discussion, I'm sure. During the earnings call on the 12th, Disney CEO Bob Chapek said that more apps like Disney Genie are coming soon, and that guests will spend less time in line. So I want to talk about this first, mostly because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like, this quote in the title is a little kind of out of context, but they talk about how they're trying to maybe like user friendly and make a better for guests to kind of have the vacation that they want. I want to
Forgive
ask
me for being a little skeptical that Disney has my best interest at heart as far as not directing me where they want.
It's a very cynical take, I think.
Yeah. Me too. I feel like they already implement, kind of techniques to get people to go to one part of the park at this specific time. And now it's just going to be in everyone's pocket. So they could really, really get personalized in that sense of, well, these people have ridden the thrill attractions and the wait is not super short, but it's short enough that if we send them over there, they might go, kind of thing. I feel like this is a way for them to, on the, at the risk of sounding a little conspiracy theory here, I feel like this is a way to control the people in the park and what they're doing rather than, giving them less time in line and more freedom and more personalization. Like, they make it sound really nice, but I don't know. I just don't feel like they are going to use it the way that we want it to be.
Well, I think you're right, definitely to the point that, Disney is going to use this just like they do with, fabricating wait times to move people around the park. But that being said, I don't think that's, necessarily a bad thing if it's used properly. If they can't, if you are able to put in here, say, like, I want to do this, this, and this, and it's able to look at all the other people that want to do those things and kind of move people around throughout the park where people, are getting to do the things they want just at different times, and they're able to utilize that technology, it could be good. But, again, we're relying on a Disney app to work properly. You're looking more into having to plan things out, which I hate. So I see good things about this if it's utilized well, but I just question if Disney is going to utilize it well.
And I also feel like they saw that touring plans had this similar type of service, and they said, how do we get people to not give them money for our parks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I agree with all of that, and I think that Disney not leaving it to touring plans is like, you're right. I think that they saw touring plans as a threat and said, let's monetize on that and make our own. Which really, they should probably leave it to the people that do it right, because even with the Lines app, like, it's 1,000 times more accurate than anything that Disney puts out. But my cynical take on this is just coming off of the tails of the announcement of paid Fast Pass for Paris. How much of this is going to be behind a paywall?
Right.
How much of this is going to be you have to pay extra for the this very much feels like a stepping stone into that, which, like, I don't want it to be, and I think me saying that is going to kind of, I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to be off-put by that, but I think it's just like the two are so easily compared, even though we don't know a lot about Genie. Just from looking at it, like, it looks like it's obviously an extra service, and there's no way that Disney's going to have both this, My Disney Experience, and, like, any of their other apps that they're planning on putting out all be free. Like, there's no way. Unless they decided to roll My Disney Experience into Genie. If they rolled all of it into one app, then I could see them being like, most of this is free, and that still would feel kind of bad. I don't know. I don't like this. I don't like the idea that Disney's planning another app when their first app is so fundamentally flawed. And then on top of that, we're already getting news from other places that Disney's just trying to make more money where they can. And I get that. They're a business. It's just, this stuff always makes me angry, especially when I start to see it coming like this.
Yeah.
That's my cynical take.
I agree, though. I'll try to reserve a little bit of judgment for when it actually comes out, but I don't have super high hopes.
I don't. And I think, I don't know. I think if it works well, it's fine. And I think if it isn't an extra additive on top, I think that's fine. There's just so many ways that this can go south quickly. Anyway, let's talk about the more exciting news, because this one I'm actually pretty upbeat and positive about. We got a sneak peek of Harmonious this week in the form of a video that was posted to Disney's social media. So we got a peek at the soundtrack of Harmonious and some show details. Did you guys by any chance happen to watch that?
I did. I watched part of it, yes.
Yeah. Did you watch any of it, Brian?
I haven't yet, but I'm looking through the pictures now, and this looks pretty incredible.
Yeah, here's my take, and I don't know how this is going to be received by everyone. This is trending to be one of my top nighttime shows, even before it's been released, and that's putting a pretty high tag on this.
I can tell you one thing: they did not go subtle with this show.
No.
This is like some of the biggest water effects I've seen.
Well, so for those that haven't had the chance to watch it, some of the cool stuff that we've gotten to see is a lot of the water effects and some of the barge effects in action. I don't really know how to explain those without telling you to just go watch it. But the part that's super exciting for me is that the soundtrack, while it feels very happily ever after, and it's like kind of a montage of Disney music from Disney movies, it's got a lot of like the languages that those stories are like native to. The songs are being sung in that language, which is really cool, and I think
Oh,
it
that's cool.
fits really well with Epcot as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the way that they could have tied the intellectual properties into Epcot and made it fit. I think everybody's so quick.
Tasteful.
Yeah, I think everybody's so quick to judge like the IP in Epcot, and I think this is like a way that it works. This is a really strong way to kind of like tie in World Showcase while also saying, hey, you're still in a Disney park.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, and I do, like you said, I really like that there's a lot of cultural influence that went into this, because it's almost like, in the same vein as Illuminations. So it's like a baby of Illuminations and Happily Ever After, which I think is a good thing, and I'm excited to see what the final product looks like.
Yeah, this could very well top Illuminations for me if it's done right. And I know that's a bold statement. So that is our news topics for this week. I guess I should pass it over to Brian first so we can cover our trip report about your exciting vacation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is going to be a bit of an interesting trip report. Last week, me and Jordan and my mom and my brother and his fiance all took a trip to San Francisco. We actually went to San Francisco, drove to Big Sur, and then stayed at another little town called Pacific Grove. But what I'm going to talk about on the podcast is one of the things that we did while we were in San Francisco, which was go to the Walt Disney Family Museum, which was really, really cool. I'm going to here post for you guys some pictures just so you can see this. But one of the things that I thought was cool was just the actual location of where the museum is at. It's in a park that's called the Presidio at San Francisco. And oops, I don't know if y'all can see that. But it is, or it was a military base that was built in San Francisco at the beginning of the U.S. joining World War II. And then after a couple of years, it kind of went into disuse, apparently. So they turned it into this park. And it's really nice because it has all these old brick buildings, and they have different things in there. The museum's there. They have... I looked up, there's other attractions. They have like a bowling alley. They have a rock climbing and bouldering gym, just a bunch of different stuff. But the center of it is this huge green space park. And it's really cool because you just go out there. Like we had a picnic in the park before we went into the museum, which was really nice. So it was definitely something that you could go and, make, a trip out of, not just if you wanted to spend a day at the museum, like you could go do some of the other stuff at this park. So it was a really cool place. But the museum itself was running a kind of a double ticket event type deal. They have the normal museum and attraction that's always there apparently, and then they were also running a separate kind of exhibit that was focused just on Walt Disney and the Disney company's kind of, the projects that they took on during World War II. So anyways, we ended up doing both of them, so I'll talk a little bit on both of the exhibits. But overall, it's very cool. Any Disney fan would definitely want to check it out if they were ever in San Francisco.
That sounds really cool.
It really was.
Definitely on my bucket list.
You should do it. But the the building that it's in is another one of the old brick buildings there, and it's beautiful. And it's funny because when we got there and parked, I was kind of like, huh, like it at first it looked kind of small to me, and I was like, wonder how much is really going to be in there. And it's kind of unassuming from the outside, but I would say don't let that fool you, because I didn't realize how big it was until we got in, and it is just packed full of stuff. But you walk in, and the first room that you come into before you actually start like the tour, it's self-guided, but you kind of walk through it one way. But the first room that you go into is just it's a collection of different awards that Walt Disney had earned over his lifetime. And it was just really cool. Like, a lot of them were like foreign film awards, and so it was cool to see all the accolades he had received, like in all these different languages on all these different awards. I mean, just hundreds of them in this one room. Just a really cool way to start it off. But once you actually start the tour, it is, more or less a history of Walt's life, and you'll start out in a room that details, the history of his family coming to America, his parents, how they met, and then ultimately him being born. And as you move through, each different room that you come into was kind of set up to display a notable era of his life. So, one room was dedicated to his childhood and, growing up in Marceline in Kansas City. And then you move into the next room, and it's about, his time spent in the Red Cross, driving an ambulance. And it's very cool because it was, it's set up to display Walt's life. It wasn't like it's not run by Disney, so it's not like, the Disney-fied kind of Walt that they want you to see. But it's at least, from the books that I've read and the research that I've done, seems more like trying to display the actual Walt than, the Walt Disney Company Walt, which I found very, very cool and refreshing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But the exhibits were absolutely incredible. It was very cool because when you go in there, they give you headphones, and if you want, there are certain stations that you can stop at, and they'll have, say, a display showing maybe like an animation cell that Walt had worked on or whatever. But you'd plug in the headphones, and it would be like Walt giving, like, him actually talking about something, either from a recorded interview or something else that he had done, like talking about, say, that cell that had been drawn. So it was very cool because you got to hear his voice a lot throughout the attraction. And on the animation cells, I think that was one of the coolest parts of the entire museum, was just they had so many original painted Disney cells. And I'm realizing I don't think I've ever actually seen one in person until I went to this, and there's so many of them, and it's hard to express how brightly colored they are, even after all these years, and how much they pop off of the page, or the cells that they've been painted on. It was really cool, and they had so many of them just throughout the entire museum. It was very, very interesting.
Wow.
It's great because, like, hearing it in your voice, I can tell like how awesome this was, and I'm super jealous.
Oh man, it was like getting to see so many of the things that I talked about when I was, doing the research for the podcast for the Walt episodes. But I realized that a lot of the stuff that I had talked about, like, I didn't really get to see them, like even pictures of them. And then getting to go do it in person and, and see it in real life it gives a whole new dimension to the story that you can't translate over audio media. So if you enjoyed those episodes, guys, and you're in San Francisco, check out the museum because it will go even more in depth and you'll get to see stuff.
It's
Wow.
funny that this is like kind of a wrap up post episode of that biography that happened like almost a
Yeah.
year ago.
Yeah. Trying to think other notable things they had. They had one of the multiplane cameras. And it's interesting because I didn't realize just how big they were, and they displayed it beautifully because they have a gift shop at the end, but they actually have the camera kind of in the gift shop, but because it's so big, you're actually going through the exhibit, walking around on the floor above it, and you look over and down into the gift shop, but you can look through the multiplane camera, and it has the different frames set up in it because
Wow.
it's like over 10 feet tall. So it's very cool to see, just how large one of those was, and how it worked and all that.
Yeah.
Then I guess one of the other notable things about it is the giant Disneyland miniature model that they have, which if you just type in Disney Family History Museum, or it's one of the first things that comes up, and it is one of the most detailed and just incredible miniature models I have ever seen before. It is massive. It's circular, and it's a map, or obviously a miniature of Disneyland, but it has to be 15 or 20 feet across, and it is
Wow.
just, I mean, it takes up the majority of a very, very large room.
Wow.
I just looked up a picture of it just to kind of follow along, and even that picture is just wow.
Yes. And it's cool because on the it's laid out as the map of Disneyland, but some of the, let's say, pieces aren't exactly like a model of what they actually are. No, that's not a very good explanation. But for example, the Carousel of Progress, the outside of it looks like a Carousel of Progress, but inside they did like a small setup of just like one of the scenes exploded. So, it's obviously something that had a ton of detail and a ton of work put into it. And I think they kind of like to make that the highlight. It's towards the end of the tour, obviously, as you're going through the timeline of Walt's life, but I think it's, the thing that the museum like wants guests to focus the attention on the most, and it's well deserved because it's incredible.
Nice.
Yeah, and other than that, I mean, as far as the main exhibit, like I said, it's mainly a history of Walt's life, and it's very well done. It's one of those things that if you breeze through it, you could probably do it in an hour or so. But if you're the kind of person that really likes to take your time and look closely at things, I mean, geez, there's no telling how much time you could spend if you wanted to actually sit there and read the information that they had. It is very, very cool for Disney fans.
How long did you spend?
So I think to do both exhibits, I think we were there for about 3 hours.
Okay.
And like there's certain things that I moved through that I probably would have enjoyed spending a little bit more time on. But all in all, I felt like I got a really good experience out of it.
Good.
The other thing about the just the park, the Presidio that it's in, it's right next to the Golden Gate Bridge. So as you're almost nearing the end of the tour, you go around the back of the building, and there's it's just all glass windows along the back of this building. And you can actually see the Golden Gate Bridge like as you're walking through the exhibit, which is pretty cool. It's very,
Huh.
very beautiful. And it's kind of like, oh wow, you forgot like I was in a, a museum. I've been looking at all this stuff, but I forget that I'm right here next to another iconic landmark.
That's awesome.
Would you say it was
Mhm.
more or less iconic than the bridge?
Well, I mean, like as a Disney fan, I think I would have to say, the museum, but let's see. There's also one of the tiki birds, which is I loved getting to see that.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I can imagine.
Mm-hmm. And just the sheer amount of things of Walt's that they had, just obviously the Disney related stuff, but even some of his earlier sketches, some of the cartoons that he did while he was overseas with the Red Cross. It was very, very nice to get to see stuff about his life outside of the company too. So I think just my favorite part overall from the main exhibit was, it was more of a look into Walt's life, not just his Disney related accomplishments. So,
Right.
yeah. And then the tour wrapped up with, Walt's death, and then they had this one room that had a wall on it that was just completely filled with the cartoons or the other artists kind of paying tribute to Walt. I know one of the famous ones is the I forgot what magazine it was in, but of the world with the mouse ears like crying upon Walt's death. But they had so many other ones from multiple countries, just showing the impact that he had on the world. In a bit of a somber way to wrap it up. But then you walk into the final room and it's just different screens, just showing different things that he'd done through animation, through the comics, just overall throughout his life. So it is like, oh, they're gonna break you down a little bit, but then they bring you back up at the end. But it was really incredible. The exhibits were top notch. You know, it's like even if you're not a huge Disney fan, I think you would look at the museum and say, "Wow, this is an incredibly well done museum." Like the work and the detail that go into stuff, they integrated so well. Having display pieces of actual, artifacts from from the timeline of Walt's life, but then also having like screens with more information and detailing processes. Just it was a very good mix of old stuff and then new technology to help you understand it and experience it better. So just looking at it kind of more objectively as just a museum, I think you would say, even not as a Disney fan, it's incredible. So
Yeah, I bet. That's definitely something I've wanted to do for quite a while now. So it's good to hear that it obviously lives up to the hype.
hmm
Yeah, it really sounds like you had a great time with it, which is
absolutely did.
really nice to hear.
And then just one other thing too, the second exhibit that was catered, or it focused just on the work Walt did during World War II. It was much smaller. I mean, obviously, it's just kind of like a secondary thing that they're doing, but it was very cool, and I definitely learned a lot with that one. They showed a lot of the propaganda films that he did, and then he talked about the processes that he went through, like dealing with the military and the government contracting for actually getting them made. But one thing that I didn't know was that he actually designed a huge number of insignia for the army. And
Hmm.
they had a wall set up that was showing the different insignia that he had done. And this was kind of a good segue to talk about, how they were taking the old artifacts and then using new technology to kind of help you interact with it. They had all the insignia, drawn up on this wall, and then next to it they had a touch screen, and it was cool because it displayed all of them in the same order that it was shown on the wall. But you could come up to the touch screen and touch on each one of them, and it would tell you, like what battalion or whatever he had done that insignia for, and give you more information about that. So you could just click on the different ones and see what it would be. So like for I'm trying to think of the one. It was what is the skunk from Bambi? Flower?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like, all you saw was her picture on this insignia, and I was like, huh, what is that? And like I clicked on it, and it was like, it was funny because it was like for some like chemical weapons division or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's funny because it's the skunk, So it was just really cool. He tried to work in, kind of some puns and jokes here and there with the insignia. So yeah. But it was really cool. I would say, anybody that's going, it was definitely worth checking out both exhibits and dedicating some time to it. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much it. I had pretty high expectations going into it, and I think they were all, beat what I thought. But yeah, it's just really great. The final thing I'll say is the gift shop is really cool because it's like a Disney historian's dream. There is so much stuff in there that I was having to limit myself as to what I was gonna get, but I ended up getting a book on Walt's 9 Old Men, and then I actually don't know where these are from. I'm holding it right now, but it's these magazines that were done called the E-Ticket that I guess were Disneyland did for. I guess it looks like it was a monthly publication, but they had copies, and on times that they talked about different attractions. And this one that I have is on Disneyland's Haunted Mansion, and it has an interview with Diane Disney Miller in it. So
Nice.
and it's from 2004. So it's pretty cool because they had all these old copies of these, or new copies of these old magazines. So I ended up picking one of those too. So I am looking forward. I haven't got a chance to dig into either one of these things yet, but I am looking forward to doing it.
Nice.
You'll have to let us know how they are when you finally do get to dig into them.
Definitely.
So, what would you say, like, what part of the museum or what artifact did you have any sense of, like, I don't know, celebrity, for lack of a better term, where you saw something and you were just, like, overwhelmed by it? Or, like, what were you most overwhelmed by as far as, like, the coolest thing, in your opinion?
Man, it's hard to say because there was so much cool stuff. The multiplane camera was one of my favorite things to see in person, and One Man's Dream shows one and does a pretty good job of walking through how it works, but seeing one that's actually set up with the in the frame spaced so far apart. Here, I'm sending a picture to the Discord. This was looking down from the second floor through the camera, just so you get a scale of how big it is.
Yeah.
That was one of the coolest parts. But really, just so much of the stuff that in your mind you get to say, Walt had his hands on this at one point. Walt touched this thing. This is an actual a piece of Disney history. This isn't a recreation. This is a thing.
Yeah.
And then another really cool display that they did was that, and I think I posted this on our Instagram, but it was a wall set up that was showing each frame of, I believe it was 8 seconds of Steamboat Willie, and
Wow.
it takes up, an entire massive wall. And this is what I'm trying to say, like, when this museum did such a good job, it's like, how do we convey how much work has to go into these the old animation? And it's like, well, you can say how many frames there are, but that doesn't mean much. But when you see it displayed out on a wall and you look at this and you think, somebody had to draw each and every single one of these. They weren't even doing cell animation at this time. Each of these were drawn. And to
Right.
see it stretched out over the wall, to see all of these hundreds of frames and realize that it only took 8 seconds of the film, that was eye-opening to me, to think that, okay, that's why it took so long for these short
Right.
films to come out. Just, it's an insane amount of work. And then
like
also,
in the cells, there's like a screen in there too that's playing a clip of Steamboat Willie to really
yes,
kind of just like give you that time frame of, wow, this is a lot for just a couple seconds.
right.
Right.
And I was about to touch on that, but yeah, that's again the them integrating newer technology into these these older pieces of Disney history. So it's overall just a really, really incredible museum, especially for Disney fans. So
Nice.
check it out if you're in San Francisco.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a good time. It sounds like it was definitely something to check out.
Oh yeah.
So I guess that's the segue into our final.
So another unique experience you can have.
Nice.
There you go. We'll leave that one in.
We
Yeah.
had a message from listener Rachel, who has a solo trip planned next summer, and was asking what the best way to manage a solo trip would be, if we had any advice or suggestions on how to go about that. So I know I have been on what I call a solo trip. Obviously, if you've listened to the podcast for a long time, you know that my best friend lives down there. So I'm not usually completely alone the entire trip, but I have spent many a park day completely alone. And that's what I'm calling my solo trip when I speak of my experience here. Have either of you ever done that?
No. So this is going to be interesting for me.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I also, before we start this discussion, I do want to say this was sent to us over Facebook Messenger, and since the live show, we've gotten at least 3 or 4 more new topics to talk about that are specific from listeners. So as always, send us messages, send us discussion things, and we'll go over them because they make for some fun episodes.
Yes,
definitely.
Anyway, continue.
So she just kind of wanted to know some pros, cons, tips, tricks, whatever. And I guess we'll just talk about that. And I guess I'll take the lead since I'm the only one who's actually done it. I know that a lot.
I figured you were going to be the only one to really have any insight here.
So basically, as far as why would you go on a solo trip, the obvious reasons would be that you don't have anybody to go with or that wants to go with you, which kind of is how my solo trip started, because my boyfriend, as wonderful as he is not, unfortunately, as big a Disney nerd as I am. So he's probably good with maybe one trip a year. I think at the most 2, but it's not that he doesn't have a good time. It's that he just doesn't get as excited about things changing as I do. It has to be like a big thing to happen for him to be like, oh, this is a different thing that we haven't done before. As far as like, he doesn't really get the, I don't know, I guess Disney being, my happy place, my comfort zone, my hangout spot, if you will. So basically the first time I went on a solo trip was just a case of, really, we already went like 3 months ago. I don't really want to go again. And I was like, well, that's okay, because I do want to go again. And it was kind of intimidating at first. And I feel like a lot of people, when they talk about, should I do a solo trip, that's like the big scary factor, is like being by yourself on vacation. And it was a little intimidating for me as well. But like I said, at least I had the comfort of having a friend down there that I could hang out with if I absolutely, got super lonely or whatever. But I ended up absolutely loving it way more than I expected to. And so obviously the pros of a solo trip is, in my opinion, the biggest pro is there's like no expectation whatsoever. You're not guiding people around, or I'm sure you guys have taken people to the parks before and you're the resident Disney nerd, so they're like, well, what should we do next?
Yeah.
There's not that pressure, which is great, and it's the most spontaneous that you can possibly be, because there's literally nobody to consult with except yourself. It's like, if you want to go sit on Carousel of Progress all day long, you can do that, because there's nobody there with you to say, I don't want to do that.
Oh, I love that ride, but that sounds horrible.
I mean, yeah, no, I don't recommend using your day at Disney like that, but if you wanted to, you could. And it also, I feel like, gave me a lot of opportunity to do things that I had been wanting to do and just didn't have the time. Or, we had so much on our plate on a trip and everybody had their things they wanted to do. We had to get all of those things done. And then by the end of the day, you're so tired, you're like, I'm just not going to do that thing I wanted to do. Like, one of my solo trips, I was like, I've never done behind the scenes, and I've really always wanted to, so I'm just going to do it because I can. There's no reason for me not to. And it was great, because I was just like, cool, I'm doing a thing that I wanted to do for the longest. The tea garden tour that they have at Flower and Garden, I did that one time when I was on a solo trip. And even just like exploring the resorts by yourself is fun, because you can just like walk around and look at stuff, and there's not that need from the people that you're with wanting to go and do. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so fun to hang out in the parks. Just to exist in the parks is great for me. So it's nice to not feel like you have to entertain anybody, or you don't have to worry about, well, are the people I'm with bored? Have they done enough? Do they feel like they've gotten their money's worth by being here? And yeah. So, I mean, realistically, I think the only con of a solo trip is that if you have a really long one, you may get lonely. But I guarantee you're not the only person there on a solo trip. And if you go hang out in, a lounge or a bar on property or a restaurant or something, you could probably find somebody else to just, chit chat with, or maybe even make a new friend. So if you're a social person, I guess I should say, that is a good option for you. And then if you're not a social person, then you probably love being by yourself, which is even better.
Is there anything that you feel, obviously having done a solo trip, that, I mean, like you said, you don't have to consult with anybody or anything along those lines, so you kind of get to freely do what you want. Is there anything that you feel like kind of makes a solo trip better than being with a group outside of that, or any like advice for someone that's wanting to do a solo trip?
Yeah, well, like you said, and I mentioned earlier, obviously the biggest benefit is just being able to do exactly what you want to do without any, consultation but from anybody else. But it's also really nice because it's super easy to navigate the parks, because you can just like zip through the crowds. A lot of times if you wanted to go see one of the fireworks shows or nighttime shows or whatever, there's a lot of times you could just squeeze in one person into a space where you definitely couldn't do, 2, 3, 4 people in that same space. So you don't have to plan as far in advance. A lot of people will camp out in front of the castle for the nighttime shows. But if you're there by yourself, you just need to be able to find enough space to squeeze in one person, which is really nice.
That's something I wouldn't have thought about, but
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah, and it's super convenient. And even just like throughout the day, getting through crowds is so much easier because you find a path and you take it. You don't have to worry about like losing the people you're with because you're not with anybody. Can't lose them.
I would have to imagine that finding dining reservations has to be much easier too.
I don't think I've ever actually made a reservation
Really?
by myself. Yeah, like obviously I've gone and eaten places by myself, but I don't think I've tried to make a actual reservation before.
I also think like if you want to kind of take advantage of this, is just me spitballing ideas here. If you want to take advantage of the fact that you're by yourself, dining by yourself may not be a bad idea to do some of like the scenic restaurants and stuff like that. Like kind of get the chance to soak in the atmosphere rather than feeling like, you have to have that time with the people you're with and, all of that. I think that, and then places like Sci-Fi Dine-In might be a great place if you're feeling kind of anxious about eating alone because you're not really going to have to pay attention to anything.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. What
I'm
else?
trying to also go through her message too, just to see if there's any questions or anything we can kind of answer. So continue your discussion and I'll chime in if I find anything.
Yeah, so overall, I would highly recommend, at least trying it. Give it a shot and see if you like it, even if it's just for a couple of days. Because it has been a blast for me every time, it's just grab a snack. At Epcot, one of my favorite things to do is during the festivals, you grab a snack, find a little bench, and people watch. Because people watching is one of my favorite things to do in general, but Disney World is the best place in the entire world to people watch.
Oh,
And
man, ain't that the truth?
when you're by yourself, you could do it for as long as you want and not worry about like anybody else getting bored or anybody who doesn't care to people watch. You just sit there, eat your snack, drink your drink, eavesdrop on people's meltdowns that they're having. It's great entertainment. But also just like chatting with cast members. Like obviously cast members are some of the greatest people and they're happy to have a conversation with you. I can't wait for the international program to get back in full swing because those people are super interesting to talk to. Yeah.
So also part of the stuff that Rachel had sent us was she was wondering like if we have any sort of recommendations for tours and things like that. Her trip it looks like June 2022, so there's a chance that some of that stuff may come back. As of right now, it's kind of hard to recommend a lot of things because most of it's not there. But having done a tour solo, how did that feel, Beth?
I thought it was really cool, because Behind the Scenes is a big group tour. Not super big. I think there were maybe 10 or 15 people in the group. I didn't really feel alone because I wasn't. So yeah, and because you're one person, I'm sure it is super easy to get into any tour, not just Behind the Scenes. I know Behind the Scenes, a lot of times you can just walk up to the counter a couple hours before and sign up and no issue regardless. But other tours that are harder to get, I'm sure it's a lot easier to get a spot when you're just flying solo. But yeah, I love Behind the Scenes, and it was a great, inexpensive, and unique experience that I would definitely recommend, especially if you're a big fan of Living with the Land, which I know we all are.
There. So just another kind of quick hit thing off of this message that was sent to us. It looks like it's a 10-day trip, and obviously June. I would say a good thing to maybe get to kind of experience at your own pace is going to be Flower and Garden because that's around that time. So obviously the festivals in Epcot are super extensive in terms of the time that they're there, but I think getting to do a lot of the little things through Flower and Garden at your own pace is going to be interesting, and you'll probably get to experience a lot of it if it comes back more than it was the last couple of years, if it's not more than just a taste.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think the festivals would be a really good thing to kind of check out, and obviously they're free too, so free for the most part.
No additional cost.
Yeah, besides the food and whatever else you want to do.
Yeah. And I know in her message, she did say that she's staying off property, which this advice I think could probably apply to that, but more so is applicable to staying on property, is that a lot of the same cast members work in the same locations at the resorts multiple days a week. So, like, for instance, when I did my solo trip back in August, I stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge. And I went to Sanaa one night, the lounge, and our server was the next day the bartender at the pool bar. So she remembered me from the night before, and we had a nice little conversation at Sanaa, and then we had a nice little conversation at the pool bar, and my Magic Band wasn't working to pay, like, with the credit card that I had attached. But because she knew me and I had this little bit of rapport with her, she's like, here, just write down your information and I'll try to, get it put through the system later. And it was just like, it was a nice little connection that we had that especially benefited me for wanting to get a drink at the pool bar and my Magic Band not working. So yeah, just like, finding those cast members that, if there's a lounge that you like or a restaurant that you like, and getting to know them is really fun. And, having like a temporary cast member friend for your trip.
Nice.
Plus, for tips, if anybody else ever has that experience, you could just give them somebody else's name and information and drink for free.
That's horrible.
Oh.
Do you feel like, obviously having done a solo trip, do you feel like there's anything that you did solo or wouldn't recommend doing solo, just to kind of like give things to maybe avoid, or everything seemed to be normal on a solo trip?
I mean, I think overall I had, great experiences. Another thing I would say is awesome for a solo trip, though, is photo pass opportunities, because then you get a picture by yourself and it's a great profile picture for your social media. But I guess the only advice I would have is to, like, be careful, especially at Epcot, is if you're drinking by yourself, which this is not happened to me, but I could definitely see it happening to someone, or maybe even me at a different time, is just make sure that you keep your wits about you, because being by yourself, even though you're at Disney World, which is a very safe place to be, you still want to be on your guard and not, accidentally leave your backpack sitting somewhere because you had too much to drink and forgot about it. Or, getting, I don't know, for lack of a better term, taken advantage of by a fellow guest that sees you're by yourself. Just because you're by yourself, make sure you keep your wits about you. But I would say if you're going to do a solo vacation, Disney World is probably the safest possible place that you can do it. But it was still kind of scary a couple of times, just walking to my car at night by myself, in the parking lot. Even though I know there's Disney security and stuff, it's just the feeling of being by yourself can get kind of scary at night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just one small thing to be aware of. But I did not encounter any safety issues. All the cast members were really nice. I know that the security at Disney is really good. There was actually one time when I was staying at Animal Kingdom Lodge, I was at Jumbo House and the pool was not open, like, late one night, or I think it was, I wanted to go watch the movie at the pool, and they were only doing it at Kidani Village. So that's like a 7-minute walk from Jumbo House to Kidani Village, and they do have an internal bus that goes from during certain times of the day. So it was still light outside when I walked there, which was fine. But then I was going to go walk back and it was nighttime and I was like not really sure if I was going the right way. So I was like standing beside the bus stop to see if the bus is going to come. And a bus driver that was dropping people off from a park, who was not the internal bus driver, told me that the internal bus was not running anymore, but he would drop me off. So that was a very nice gesture of him. Even though it wasn't his job to do that, he still did it. So, but like I said, just something to be aware of if you're staying at one of those resorts where you're walking from place to place, that although I don't actually think it's unsafe, it doesn't feel nice sometimes to be by yourself at night, especially as a woman, unfortunately.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I think it's a good thing to be mindful of because you don't want to have the experience where you just don't feel safe.
Yeah.
Right. Also, make sure you bring an external battery pack for your phone because you will use it a lot by yourself.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see me wanting to use my phone more because there's not somebody there to talk to or
Exactly. But overall, very positive experiences on all of my solo trips.
seems like an overly a very positive review of going solo, which is good. And I think lots of good advice that we can give. I know Beth made some recommendations of things to check out on older episodes, so go back, check those out. And yeah, definitely something. I don't know that I could ever do a solo trip, but if I did, it sounds like it would be fun.
I feel, like I'm sure eventually I will, just being close enough where I can kind of go for the day, I don't know if Jordan's ever out of town or something like that. I can definitely see just hopping over and going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's different for you because it's
it's not like planning a trip, but
yeah, you're like right around the corner. You don't have to fly by yourself or drive by yourself. Well, I guess you do drive by yourself, but still.
yeah.
Speaking of which, can you still hear the dogs really bad in the background?
No,
Just a little
you're
bit.
good.
Okay, sorry. They are really, truly a mess. Anything that's my parents live in a cul-de-sac, so anything that's in the cul-de-sac that gets their attention, they'll go off for like 10 minutes. But as far as transportation goes, that's another thing that I would say is crucial to make sure that you're stocked up on entertainment options for your travel, whether that's a plane ride or a car trip, especially me driving down there by myself when I do go on a solo trip. It's about a 7-hour drive, and that can get extremely boring by yourself. So definitely have your playlists ready. Check out some audiobooks. A lot of libraries out there have free audiobook programs, so look into that. Podcasts like this one. Hey. Just make sure that you have a plethora of options to keep yourself entertained because it can get really, really boring really fast on the travel itself, especially.
Nice.
Which that's another fun thing about if you're driving, you can, and you see something cool on this, I'm a big weird tacky tourist trap type of person myself, so if I see something that looks like interesting that I want to stop at, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna stop because why not? So anybody if you know of any weird tacky touristy things on the route from South Carolina to Florida that I should check out, let me know. See like the world's biggest ball of yarn or something. I love stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
You'll have to do a trip report if you ever stop there.
Yeah, for sure.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.